Welcome back to 340 Paddler, and today we are dealing with week 2 of the 340 Paddler training program, where you can get buff to the point where you can leave the little flag on your boat and no one will notice. It's just extra drag and it doesn't matter, especially if you're Brad Daniels. Then you apply more power and it doesn't matter from there. Anyway, moving on. So you're sitting there going, but 10 minutes doesn't seem like very much. In fact, what the heck are you doing? But have faith, Grasshopper. We will get you to the start line in good shape. So let's talk about our cardio. Moving into week 2, and it's going to be pretty predictable what I'm going to ask you to do. Now, our goals for week 1 were to run 10 minutes continuously, trying to keep your heart rate under 155 or so. Bike, 15 minutes continuously. One of these, obviously not all 3. You're shooting for doing this cardio about 3 days a week. Now, when you look at this, if you haven't managed to run for 10 minutes without having to stop for your breath, or similar issue with the bike or the swim, what I want you to do is stick to week 1. Stay at that level for as long as it takes until you can run continuously for 10 miles. For some people, this may take a couple of days. For others, it could take a little while. Do not let your ego push you beyond your bounds at this point. That comes later. Right now, my concern is to avoid overtraining injuries. And again, my assumption is you're starting from 0. If you aren't, you can always jump ahead. Well, at least when I post those videos. So week 2, pretty predictable. Run, I'm looking for about 15 minutes, 3 days per week, non-consecutive. And that is so that if you have a pain that turns up, we have time to see if it's something major or not, if it's something important or not. So you always want that day in between, especially starting out. Again, trying to keep that heart rate low. The bike, we're up to 20 minutes. The swim, we're up to 15. Don't swim in hard water. Ice is painful to run into. So why cardio? Why am I telling you to go out and do cardio? Well, a couple of reasons. As I mentioned before, cardio takes a while to build up. Cardio fitness takes about 6 months, so you need that extra time to work with it. Secondly, it's about habit. I'm getting you out the door and doing something every so often. So you get into the habit of going and doing this thing, in this case, either running or swimming or biking or whatever else. So that habit's going to be really important later on when you're sitting there going, wow, I do not want to do this thing. Or, when you're trying to push off from Cooper's Landing. Although that's not so much habit as grit, but you get the idea. So, lest you lose faith, this is the progression that I'm working you through. And eventually, once all the videos are up, you'll be able to skip to wherever you happen to be. So my phase 1 progression, and in this example, we're looking at run, but you could do the same thing with bike or swim, and I'll explain that in a minute. Week 1, I'm looking for 10 minutes. 3 workouts of 10 minutes. Week 2, 15. Week 3, 20. Week 4, 30. We're slowly building up. I don't want to build you up too quickly. You'll also notice I'm not measuring miles at this point. Week 5, we're actually going to tone it back a little bit and cut those back to 20. The reason is I want to avoid burnout. So every so often, about every 5 weeks, things will back off a little bit. As we move into week 6, that's where we start measuring runs by miles. Starting at 3 miles, 3 runs of 3 miles. Week 7, we have 2 runs of 3 miles and 1 run of 4. In other words, we're adding 1 mile per week. By week 8, we add those 2 miles to the 2 4-mile runs, and we have 1 3-mile run. And by week 9, hopefully, you're running 3 4-mile runs. So let's say you're doing this via swim. What you would want to do is use the same minute progressions, and then when we get to miles, simply read it as roughly 10 minutes per mile. So, for example, in week 9, you would be swimming 3 swim sessions of 40 minutes, give or take. Bike, roughly the same thing, except you're going to be working up to about an hour on the bike, give or take. And the reason is a bike does not have the same, does not apply the same stresses to the cardio system. Now, if you're doing something else, if you're rowing, for example, you would use the same progression, but you would keep to minutes rather than miles, or eventually you would sort of flip over and do kilometers. So you might work up to 20 and 30, and then you start flipping over to kilometers, doing 6,000 meters, doing 7,000 meters, 8,000 meters. If you were doing this on an ergometer, you might follow basically the same principle. So there is a method to my madness. I am working you up slowly, but again, I'm assuming you're going from 0. So if you happen to know that you can do all of this and you have you can do 4 miles 3 days a week, awesome. That's the base we're going to work from later in the program to try and develop a long day. After all I'm trying to do is get you to the 340 and get you through it in a good time. By the way, if you want to scale things, you can start pushing time a little bit, but I wouldn't do it too much, especially in the first couple of months here where we're just laying a foundation. Once we get past that point, that's when you can go get crazy competitive and try and beat your times. Otherwise, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, quarrels, qualms, quandaries, curse words, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can find me on Facebook. I'm in the 340 Paddler group, or you can just keep your paddle in the water.